House in Baltimore of the summer, where we're finally getting through the baseball and the trading deadline and awaiting the NFL season. It feels like it can't get here soon enough for all of us who cover the NFL. This guy covers the NFL for USA Today. He is one of our defending champions around here and a fellow Joshua Tree U2 Warrior. We welcome Nate Davis back onto the program. You can follow his journey as well as Where the Streets Have No Name at by Nate Davis on Twitter. Happy welcome to you and U2, and welcome to football season, right? I mean, this has been a very tumultuous offseason, as I'm learning when I go to Raiders and Rams and Chargers and places where they don't have quarterbacks, amongst other things. There's plenty of great stories in the big city on the NFL and a lot of expectation in a lot of places.
Yeah, I mean, we're getting at that part of the year, like you said, Nestor, where, the NBA is gone, and then if you're in one of those places where your baseball team doesn't have you happy, certainly of good subplots to follow. Contracts have been signed, some have not been. We got guys that didn't get paid, and, and this, it'll be fun just to kind of get ready to talk about the teams themselves. The Patriots going to lose a game. All types of crazy stuff to hash out here.
Well, we can all hope that they're going to lose a game. In the case of the Ravens, it has really been a choppy offseason of lowered expectations, the disappointment of not making the playoffs, where the organization is not having made the playoffs 3 out of 4 years, where the team is with Flacco and his pay and his injury and coming back, and who's going to run the ball and who's going to catch the ball. And somehow, some way, Ozzie Newsome, through all of this, winds up pulling the rabbit out of the hat with the Macklin deal very, very late in the game. And as we go into camp, I think there is optimism around here that this team is going to compete this year, certainly going to be better on the defensive side of the ball, but so much speculation about the offensive line and all the skill position players and what that means for Joe Flacco as he now enters his early 30s.
Yeah, well, like you said, lots of moving parts. Jeremy Macklin was definitely a gift of a guy to get in June. You don't see those guys like him switching teams that late in the game very often, but that definitely softens the loss of Steve Smith. Obviously, Joe Flacco's not going to be happy, nor any Baltimore fan, about poor Dennis Pitta's demise again. But, there is reason for optimism. I think Danny Woodhead's going to be a great addition to that offense. Like you said, they got to figure out, losing Ricky Wagner and Zuda, and then hopefully the rest of it can work. And the defensive line, too. I guess really if you look at the Ravens, the two major areas to me are all in the trenches there. Are they going to be okay on the O-line and the D-line outside of a Brandon Williams there? So stuff to hash out, but, I mean, this team is usually competitive. I think probably you have to say the Steelers are still the class of that division, but certainly you could see the Ravens competing for the division title and certainly being a good wild card team if it all comes together.
Nate Davis joining us here from the USA Today. He is by Nate Davis out on Twitter. Sell me some optimism on whatever you're optimistic about. Like, as this season begins, obviously there are the Patriots, and I guess in the NBA we would say the same thing about the Warriors. Who's going to go beat them? In your mind, who's going to go beat them? Where are the Falcons really the second best team still, kind of, sort of?
I haven't hashed all that out yet. I would say they probably are. I think the Falcons have made kind of a lot of good under-the-radar signings, guys like Don Terry Poe and Tack McKinley for their defense, and obviously that defense is what got worn down late last year. So I think they've done a lot of good stuff to kind of remedy what their flaws were. But it's just the NFC is just so much more competitive, and they've just got a tougher gauntlet in my mind to run with teams like the Packers, maybe the Cowboys, certainly the Seahawks. Do the Cardinals get back at a contending status? I just think it's much tougher to get through the NFC than it is the AFC. So as good as the Falcons are, you can certainly see them getting knocked out, I think, more easily than the Patriots in the AFC, unless something really catastrophic befalls them. But really hard to say right now. I mean, I don't know anybody that's got the guts to pick against New England winning the AFC right now.
We in Baltimore have a perverse fascination with hating all things Redskins. At least I've had that most of my adult life. And, I couldn't help but being in Washington early in the morning on Monday, getting my passport renewed. And that's another segment unto itself, Nate, as I'm sure you can imagine, for international travel at this point. But the Redskins, Kirk Cousins, 4 o'clock Monday, the deadline, faxes, teams, money, long-term contracts. there's real turmoil with the Redskins, and I think more than that, much like to some degree our government, when it speaks, you almost don't believe it. I mean, the Redskins have had the worst offseason, I think, in the league, and I think the fan base sort of understands that and knows it. It feels a little rudderless all over again, doesn't it?
Well, it's just hard to believe, when you've got a guy that has proven as capable as Kirk Cousins has, and then, I remember years ago when they took all that heat for drafting both Cousins and RG3, and why the heck would they need two quarterbacks? And it turns out, that they got the right one there. And then they haven't bothered to lock him up. And, my question constantly is, what is the fallback for them if you don't have Kirk Cousins in 2018 or beyond? We all know that they've got, this ridiculous franchise number of $34.5 million. If they try to do it again with him in 2018, they're talking about, there's talk out there, are they going to transition tag him? But that opens up the door for some other team to steal him away. And certainly we know some of the teams that are going to be interested in him. But I just don't know why you'd mess around with the most important position on your team for a guy that's going to be 29 years old. I mean, it's just something they could lock down and not worry about. And go into the future, knowing that he's comfortable in Jay Gruden's offense, Jay Gruden's comfortable with him, and worry about other stuff. And like you said, there's certainly other issues on this team beyond Kirk Cousins' contract status. Defensive line there, really questionable beyond a rookie, and you can't really count on Jonathan Allen to be a stud. So right away. So yeah, this team's got problems, and it seems like the biggest one is of the Redskins' own making.
It is fascinating with a lot of these quarterbacks. They go out, they win 9, 10, 11 games, whatever it is. And, whether it's Andy Dalton in Cincinnati or Alex Smith in Kansas City or Kirk Cousins, when your name's not Brady or Rodgers, everyone questions whether you can win, right? I mean, we still have that with Flacco, even though he did it and has, led the team to division championships and multiple, double-digit victory, all of that stuff. There's still sort of this doubting Thomas part that plays into this when you don't have the pelts on the wall or that crazy skill set and that body size. In the case of Kirk Cousins, he is sort of kicked around a little bit like an Alex Smith or an Andy Dalton or a guy to say, well, we can win 10 games with him, but are we really going to win a Super Bowl with him? I think Romo dealt with that too.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's true, but a lot of times, I don't know that anybody thought Russell Wilson was going to lead a team to the playoffs in his second year when he got drafted in the third round in 2012. And
Prescott's the same thing, right? Literally, right?
Yeah, exactly. But there's that crazy stat out there that I think since 2001, Brady, Roethlisberger, or Peyton Manning had been in every Super Bowl except for the Flacco-Kaepernick Super Bowl after the 2012 season. So it just goes to show that it's hard to find these guys, and if you don't have one of those other guys, you've got to find the best possible fallback or alternative you can. These stud quarterbacks don't grow on trees, and there's a certain element of luck in finding one. And if you get a good one who gets hot, I mean, Joe Flacco is the poster boy of the guy that it just takes a couple games strung together at the right time of the year. I mean, for my money, Eli Manning is kind of in that same category. I don't think anyone's ever going to say Eli is an elite quarterback, but he's proven to be good enough to take you all the way if the supporting cast is there. So I think you got to build your team with that idea. Like, let's do as much as we can with the whole team and hope we can get a reliable guy under center, and that's probably as best as you can hope to do, and go from there and take, have a puncher's chance. But when you don't have that, tell me the last team that had a subpar quarterback. And I don't mean to invoke Trent Dilfer's name or anything here, Nestor. They're in Baltimore, but the Trent Dilfers and the Brad Johnsons that win Super Bowls are kind of few and far between.
He is Nate Davis. He is by Nate Davis out on Twitter and, of course, at the USA Today and usatoday.com. You can follow his journey as he covers the National Football League, and we're all kind of getting ready and getting up on this baseball trading deadline. But football keeps its nose in all of this. Even in this offseason, there have been some weird things. I mean, the Bills firing their front office after a draft. Now the Carolina Panthers, shocking news. And, we were kind of shocked around here when Brian Brian Billick got fired a year after 13-3. Here's a guy that, put that team together and led them to a Super Bowl that they could have, should have won in Santa Clara 18 months ago, and now he's canned at the weirdest time of the year, and not a real popular guy, guy that ruffled feathers all the way along his journey, and I think there's a lot of he said, she said going on, but in a relatively slow news period of time, the Carolina Panthers making some massive, massive July news.
Yeah, and I mean, this comes on the heels, too, of the Kansas City Chiefs doing the same thing with John Dorsey last month in June. That being said, you mentioned the Bills, too. I think if you're running a team, and that means from an owner perspective or a team president perspective, so much of this scouting work goes into, is done over the course of the year, and it culminates with the draft. So I think probably the ideal time to make a major front office change is after the draft. The Bills did it right afterwards, but you don't want to do this thing in November. Once your scouts are already looking at game film and assessing prospects and all that, and it is really odd timing for the Panthers, given how good they were in 2015 and reaching a Super Bowl. But I guess better now and better to get your front office changes, those guys on the same page as you begin training camp and you get ready to start looking at college players than doing it 6 weeks or 2 months from now. So, we'll see. But very odd given how well Dave Gettleman had drafted for that team and really fixed things from his predecessor, who had made a lot of questionable contract signings, guys like D'Angelo Williams, when you recall, stuff like that, really.
Well, Steve Smith, had a field day. I mean, Steve Smith checked in from Hawaii on Twitter, and I know, he sat with me on many occasions and talked about Gettleman, and obviously the Josh Norman thing down there wasn't too popular either. But I mean, they did go to the Super Bowl year and a half. If it comes down to how to put a franchise together, he's pretty good at that. I think some of the interpersonal relationships weren't the best, but it's also a weird time to be doing it. I think timing's everything in the league, that you want to do some of these things on a better clock than in the middle of July, right?
Yeah, like I said, probably so. But I'm not really sure what the ideal time is. I guess logically you would think that kind of stuff happens in January. But again, I think when you're talking about front office guys, so much of the free agent homework and scouting homework of college players happens over the course of the year and into the Senior Bowl and all that. That's probably, I guess you could argue this is a better time to make that kind of move than it is in January or February, when so much of the hay is already in the barn and so much of what you're trying to do philosophically is already done. But, again, we'll see. And like you said, obviously there was some personality stuff with Gettleman and some of his former players. But, that being said, Bill Belichick's no one's best friend up in New England either. And Ted Thompson's not actually a cuddly guy in Green Bay. So, I don't mind if my general manager makes hard decisions and isn't the most popular guy in the room, but when he's doing well, it's this kind of move that definitely makes you kind of sit back and wonder what really happened there.
It's been a couple of months since I've talked about the Patriots around here. I've enjoyed that during baseball, but certainly leading up to the draft and at the beginning part of free agency, they sort of won, right? And they didn't just win the Super Bowl. They sort of won the offseason very quickly and then turtled up, and we haven't heard a peep out of them in 3-4 months now. And they're going to begin this thing into, maybe you were tongue-in-cheek, maybe you weren't, but, when the question in August is, will they lose a game? Boy, that's a lot of expectations going on in New England, and, they don't turtle up about that at all. They're ready for those expectations, but I think people are expecting them to be the 1 seed again in the AFC, and certainly Vegas is ready to bet on that.
Yeah, well, you'd think so. Given that they went 14-2 last year, with Tom Brady missing 4 games, and he just had the one loss to Seattle, I want to say, in the middle of the year. But I can't imagine they're going to lose any games in their division. I think chalk them up for 6-0. Right there. But, like you said, they add Brandon Cooks to the mix. Theoretically, Rob Gronkowski is back to 100% after missing, 8 games in the regular season last year and all the postseason. They get Dante Hightower back. That's some nice parts with Tony Ely and Dwayne Allen and all these guys. I guess the only question you really kind of wondered about the Patriots, at least for me anyway, I was surprised they didn't bring LeGarrette Blount back, given he wasn't a break-the-bank kind of guy and given what a huge year he had for them last year. So I'm not totally sure what the plan is for them At running back, they got about 4 guys back there that I'm sure they'll do their standard mix and match kind of thing. But I think everywhere else in the passing game defensively, I think they're going to be better. At least they are on paper. And I'm just, me personally, unless they're 15-0 and have that 1 seed locked up going into week 17 or whatever, I'm just not sure I'm going to be able to pick against them this year.
For the Ravens in this division, it's always about the Steelers and the Bengals. And, as much as I mentioned the Redskins taking steps backwards, I think it's hard to look at the Bengals and think that they're moving forward from where they were. And they always say the window closing and all of that. But, boy, there's been a lot of turnover on that roster. And maybe that's not a bad thing. I mean, they had as stable a roster. I mean, every year they would come in here, we'd go down there. It was the same group of players. I would say at this point for them, I'm looking at how are they going to win 10 games, and they've taken the biggest step backward. And I don't know that the Browns are much better either.
Yeah, well, I think the Browns have to be better, right? Hopefully, they're better than 1-15. And I like some of the moves that they've made in terms of investing big money in their offensive line. I think that's a great place to put the free agent dollars that they've got. We'll find out what they've got under center. I mean, I think maybe we'll find out about Deshaun Kaiser this year. And that's probably going to be the biggest indicator as to whether they draft another quarterback in the first round next year. Bengals are interesting too. I think they've got issues on their offensive line, letting Whitworth go and letting Zeitler go. But I sure like the John Ross draft in the first round. I mean, you had a guy with 4.2 speed to AJ Green and Tyler Eifert. Assuming these guys are all healthy, that's going to be some interesting stuff for a defense to deal with. Plus Joe Mixon. All these guys, Mixon, Ross, Eifert, et cetera, they've got their own specific kind of red flag, whether it be injury or whether it be off-field stuff or whatever. But if it works, that offense could be, and assuming they can block for Andy Dalton, which to me is the biggest issue, that could be a fun offense to watch. We'll see. I mean, I think the Bengals, if things come together, they could be right there scrapping with the Ravens to try to knock the Steelers off. We'll see. There's
always drama around the diva up in Pittsburgh, but Big Ben is back this year. I'm shocked. But we are getting toward the end, right? For this and for that offense, the Ravens are still going to have to try to figure out how to stop it. Has Pittsburgh gotten any better on defense, I guess would be the question.
Well, they're better in that Cam Hayward is back after missing most of last year with his chest injury. I mean, so I think his leadership and ability helps right there. Otherwise, Nestor, I'm not sure. They let Lawrence Timmons go, who's obviously a steady guy for them for many years. So they're banking on Vince Williams inside there with Shazier. Shazier seems to have trouble staying on the field for a full season. But to me, the big issue is the pass defense, and that means both. Can they find somebody to rush the passer besides James Harrison? They can't keep letting him play, that many snaps, I don't think. So can T.J. Watt do it? Can Bud Dupree do it on a consistent basis? And then will the guys in the back end, Artie Burns and some of these other guys they've got in the secondary, can they defend? And then also the schematic point. I'm not sure they had a really good game plan going against the Patriots in the AFC Championship game last year and didn't really adjust very well. So to me, pass defense, whether you talk about being edge pressure or guys that are able to cover on the back end, to me that's the biggest Achilles heel for the Steelers, provided, like you say, that Big Ben doesn't have his usual 4-game injury, or Le'Veon Bell doesn't have his usual 3-game injury, or whatever it is. I think those are the issues they got to worry about.
He is Nate Davis out at usatoday.com and by Nate Davis out on Twitter. Last thing for you, the west of the AFC, we're going to see Oakland. We're going out there, and I've talked to some folks. I think the Raiders have high expectations. They got a quarterback coming back from an injury. They have this whole Vegas thing going on as well, but they are expected to win double digits. I mean, it's been a long time since the Raiders were favored in the division. Broncos trying to figure out the quarterback thing. Chargers trying to figure out how to play in a soccer stadium, and the Chiefs look to be in a little bit of disarray right now. That West is a little choppy right now, but all of those teams are perceived as being playoff caliber teams.
Yeah, I think so. I think maybe the Chargers are the one people don't talk about enough, but they're getting a lot of guys back from injury. They're getting that Gus Bradley defense going. They've got a really talented defensive line there with Melvin Ingram, Joey Bosa, Brandon Meadman. I mean, they've got some players there. Like you said, I think their biggest issue is learning how to play in the new city and all the stuff that comes along with that. But it should be a very competitive, AFC West. How did Jamal Charles and guys like that adapt in Denver? Does the quarterback issue get ironed out there as well? But like you said, I think the Raiders have to be considered the prohibitive favorites. Their Achilles heels, obviously, the defense, and specifically up the middle with the linebackers and the defensive tackles. But I think everyone's excited to see what Marshawn Lynch is going to bring. You know, did he get refreshed after a year off? Did he get old after a year off? And that's probably going to be the biggest determinant of whether or not they're able to move forward. But it sure is going to be fun watching him play for his hometown team.
Nate, what is it 30 years later about the Joshua Tree that makes grown men like us get on airplanes and fly to places like Vancouver and Seattle and Chicago and Dallas or Dublin or Paris in my case to chase them around? I haven't talked a lot about U2 on the radio. I have tweeted a little bit about it and Facebooked a little bit about it when I've been running around. There have been some nights where my phone's been in my pocket and I didn't even post anything up because I've enjoyed the show so much. But there's something about that album, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I can certainly sing all those songs in my head backwards and forwards, and it sure was cool to see them break out some of the ones that they'd never, at least one that they never performed live, and they just put on such a great show with all the stuff that goes around the music, the audio visual stuff, the display, the basic movie that's playing in the background, and I don't know. I mean, if you love U2, you love them, and you're going to enjoy whatever Bono's got to say on a particular night, but. I think those guys have had fun kind of going back and re-exploring their old music, and I don't think that they've really, from what I've read and from listening to the shows, there were. I think that this is stuff they hadn't unpacked, in 20 years or so since they moved on to the other stuff, and they were really kind of determined to, quote unquote, cut down the Joshua Tree, once they did Octoon Baby and move forward into their future. A lot of these guys don't like to live in the past, but I think this has been a fun experience for them, and I think it's been a great way to find out how much their fans love them and their music, and it's nice to see them kind of do a little bit of a sit back and kind of do this greatest hits tour for a change. You
know what I thought was fascinating, just from a tactical standpoint? You were there, I was there in Vancouver the first night of the tour. When they did Red Hill Mining Town, it was almost like they didn't know what they were doing with it. And by the time the thing got to Philadelphia and Washington, it has become one of the highlights of the set for me. It's an obscure song, but the way that they figured out how to do it and rework it 30 years later, and adding mysterious ways later on and adding some stuff. Mm-hmm. I wish they were mixing it up more, and I think the choreography of the show is a little disappointing in that way. I mean, I'm a Springsteen guy, right? I mean, you go out and you see a different show every single night. That's not the case with U2 in this tour, nor is it the case with Tom Petty right now or a bunch of other bands that have 1,000 songs but seem to be doing the same 20 every night. But for U2, this is I'll give you a little bonus. When they decided to do the U.S. leg in September, turns out they're playing in Indianapolis the night that the Ravens are in Cincinnati that morning to start the season. So I'm getting a little double shot of U2. I'm going to get a little bonus Indianapolis action in September because everybody should go to Indianapolis an extra time every year. But U2's there, so I'll be there. So it'll be all good.
Yeah, well, God bless you. I'm hoping to catch him one more time in the fall if I can figure it out logistically myself. You mentioned Red Hill Mining Town. I think when we saw that in Vancouver, Nestor, I think that was the first time it had ever been played live. So, like you said, I think they've kind of had to figure out how to do that. But I mentioned the show, and I think this was the same way with the Innocence Experience and so many other shows. I think when you have so much stuff going on stage with the background show and everything else, you certainly do lock yourself into a good percent of that set list. And my alternate band has always been Pearl Jam, and obviously the great thing about them is they kind of come out and just do that set list on the legal pad every night and just kind of wing it and figure out what they feel like playing. So you too obviously can't do that with everything they've got going on around the show, and then you end up seeing 80% of the same thing every night. But hey, I'll take it. I love those guys, and they never disappoint me. Yeah, what I was saying to my wife is, this time next year I won't be able to see them do, One Tree Hill anymore. So I'll take it as I can get it here as I get older. We're just happy to be alive 30 years later, I think. Nate Davis joining us here from USA Today. You can follow his journey out on Twitter @by Nate Davis. He covers the National Football League and pretty much anywhere U2 and Pearl. Wait, we got to get some Pearl Jam dates here soon, too, right? Got to figure that out. I hope so. Like you said, it sure was awesome seeing better up there with U2 at Seattle. But, I'm looking for those guys to come back. And they skipped D.C. and Baltimore last time. I went to Hampton Roads, so I had to go down there and see them. But hopefully they'll be in this area sometime soon. Yeah, I was peeing in the bathroom at CenturyLink in Seattle and during Mothers of the Disappeared. And people came into the bathroom like, Eddie Vedder's on stage. And I'm like, I got to hurry. It's good seeing you, man. Great having you on. Okay, thanks, Nestor.
You got it. By Nate Davis is the way to find him out on Twitter. And Nate Davis, of course, at usatoday.com, covering the National Football League. You can find me out in the Buy Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world. I am reading the Peter Principles next week. You can find it there. You can read it yourself in the old-fashioned, traditional reading free online way at WNST.net if you want the history of Peter Giangelos and the Orioles. Luke's at the ballpark this week. We will be together in Owings Mills when things get started there next week. And in the meantime, you can follow us out on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports.